Hello, and welcome to the Angus and Pete Show. Views and opinions are strictly those of the presenters and their guests and should not be taken as advice. Goodness knows, we're not qualified to advise you about anything. Side effects may include mild amusement and occasional enlightenment with feelings of embarrassment, apathy, disappointment, and pity.
Welcome to episode 19. I'm Angus Pacey.
And I'm Pete Brown, and we are the Angus and Pete Show.
The place where you can listen to two guys chatting about that riveting world of customer engagement.
That's customer engagement, otherwise known as call centre, contact centre, customer service, customer experience, CX, or whatever else you're calling it this week.
And if you want to find out more about us, then just check us out on LinkedIn.
Hey Angus, what's in the postbag this week?
Well, strangely enough, we did actually have a couple of people contact us. Phil from Manchester, he got in touch with us again.
Ooh,
He's a regular listener and he loves interacting with us. He sounds like one of those sort of seasoned pre-sales people. He said he's got a simple rule, and I think he's talking about our demo episode.
Yep.
It's got a simple rule that says no discovery equals no demo.
I can imagine him saying that whilst waggling his finger. Thanks, Phil.
We like that.
I got pinged by Vernon from Strasbourg, who also liked the demo episode, and he agreed. He said demos are absolutely the place to show the customer that you understand their problem and how you address it. Show the value and leave the features in the bag, he said.
Oh, that's going to hurt some of the technical community that do demos.
With their bag full of features.
The other one was interesting. Is Shelley from Bournemouth pinged me and she said, I'm a newbie in the industry. Just started out on a CX sales team. I've never been to a contact center. What's it like to really work in one?
Well, one of the most interesting things I did when I started, and I've been doing it ever since, is just go and ask a customer if you can sit in their contact center, plug in next to an agent, and just sit and listen and experience what goes on. I've never been turned down, never been refused, because I think most customers really appreciate, particularly salespeople wanting to do that. And not many salespeople do. They're all too busy and important to go and sit with the people that are actually using the stuff they're making thousands of pounds of commission out of. So that's what I'd do. Go and show an agent that you care.
And I'd actually add to that for all the seasoned salespeople that are listening to us, all those sellers out there that work in our space, do it on a regular basis.
Yeah.
Almost do it with every customer you go and speak to if you get that chance, because you get a lot of information from that. Now, Shelley, this episode might give you a clue also of what it's like to be a manager in a contact center as well, because I think that perspective is important.
So, Angus, talking about what's coming up next, on with the show.
Yeah, this episode, we've got another CX insider for you.
Yeah, so our CX insiders are people that we've handpicked as guests because they're experts in their field, they're knowledgeable, they have experience and stories that we think our listeners will want to hear.
These experts join us on the show in their own right. Their views are their own. They don't represent any organization or third party. We don't pay anybody or give inducements either way. We don't take them either. So this is totally independent.
So our CX insider this week is Dan, and he's a contact center and CX professional. He's managed and directed contact centers and customer experience operations for 15 years plus. He's been right up the sharp end. Most of his career, he's been in business process outsourcing. And for those of you that like their three-letter acronyms, that's BPO. In all of that, he's been focused on striking a balance between great customer service and customer experience on the one hand, and operation efficiency on the other.
We sat down with Dan earlier to hear what he's got to say about the world of contact center and customer experience, service delivery and service levels. And what struck me about the conversation is that he really covers the nitty-gritty from real experience. He's talking about what it's like to do it, not just think or talk about doing it. And I think when you listen to this, that will really come across. It was really interesting.
So, without further ado, let's go and listen to what he had to say for himself.
CX Insider, your inside track.
So, Dad, why don't you introduce yourself and give us a bit about your background for those people that have not guessed that already?
Sure. So thank you very much for having me on here, my very, very first podcast. My name's Dan Piper. I've spent 15 years, give or take, in the outsource industry, predominantly focused on customer experience, operational efficiency and effectiveness, and generally just trying to give clients good value for their money.
So you come from the buyer side of the business. We talk about sellers and buyers. You come from the buyer, the customer side, the users of the technology.
Yeah, I would say so. We're sort of stuck as an intermediary with it being the BPO industry, because clearly we do need to procure certain technologies from tech firms. But similarly, we're also sellers of services to clients, because clearly we are the face of their brands. Those clients might have already procured the software and we still need to utilize it and use it. I guess we could be seen as buyers and sellers.
Okay. So if I think about it, a lot of customers and resellers that listen to this show have mentioned changes in the industry and interactions from pre-COVID times to post-COVID times. In the BPO industry specifically, you've been exposed to lots of different customers and different vendor technologies. What have your observations been? What's changed? What hasn't changed?
So there's a lot of complexity. So that if I rewind the clock 10 years, it's a night and day difference. Back when I was right at the operational coalface, I would not dream of coming up short on service level performance. If my abandon rate went over a certain percentage, I was hauled over the coals. Not just by my clients, but also the senior leadership within the BPO space. They wanted reasons, rationale, justifications as to why it had happened in the first place, but also what were you going to do about it? And as an operational leader, you absolutely had to have that strength of conviction that you knew exactly what you were talking about in order to deliver those service levels. And just going into a bit more depth on that, I remember things being written into contracts which stated that abandon rates would sit between 4 and 5% in terms of a target. And if you were even close to that 5% mark, they wanted to know why it was so high, even though you were still well and truly within your contractual threshold. And that's how hard you had to work 10 or so years ago. It was really, really tough. But COVID happened. All of a sudden, you've now got this default tone and text which says your call is important to us. You may be waiting 2 hours or 2 days for your call to be answered. I'm saying it in jest here a little bit. We all know which organisations are guilty. The public sector is a nightmare for it. I don't know if you've had to call HMRC recently to update them on your tax status. I know I have. It's anyone's guess, isn't it, whether or not you're going to get through to somebody. I think I've actually sat on hold to public sector bodies probably for an hour and a half plus before I actually get a response.
You are a lot more patient than I am. I would never do that.
You should ask them if you could set off that hourly rate against your tax. I'm sure they'd be accommodating.
Well, I do know why. It's understaffed. Businesses are chancing their arm now. When COVID happened, everyone had to have more patience with the fact that things were going to take longer than expected. I mean, even if you went into a supermarket, you'd see signs around the place stating, please be kind to our staff. They're here to help you. But post-COVID, we seem to have been sucked into a void where now people aren't even allowed to discuss their level of dissatisfaction for how poor the service is. And you're like, I don't think you're respecting our staff. No, I'm just telling them that I'm bloody annoyed with the fact that their service is not meeting my expectation. When did that become a crime?
So do you think that is the service providers that are taking advantage of that? Do you think it's the consumers and the customers have got a little bit softer on the whole thing, a little bit more accepting of average? What is it?
I do think that the service providers are chancing their arms a little bit. I think that there is less expectations around what service is nowadays. If you look at your cable company, or your satellite TV provider or your mobile phone provider, you know that it's going to take you ages to get an answer on those lines. You don't know where you're going to be answered, whether it's onshore, whether it's offshore. The COVID period came and went in a blink of an eye, but at the time, it felt like forever. And businesses were well and truly stuck because you've had a lot of organizations that have had to let people go in that period. Face-to-face training, well, what's that? Let's move everything to web-based training. You couldn't have these people meeting face-to-face. Now, I think coupled with the loss of staff during that period, you lost a lot of really, really knowledgeable, tenured, operational people that knew their stuff in relation to contact center management.
So professionalism and experience went out the door with a lot of those people.
Well and truly. We then ended up with scenarios where people have just been promoted without that necessary exposure, without the proper training from senior learning people that truly know what it's like to run contact center operations. And I can talk from experience. In a pre-COVID world, learning managers knew how to be operational people. Post-COVID, I've heard of scenarios whereby learning managers are almost trying to pass the buck. We can't possibly train this operational thing. The operation need to own that. Well, how do we expect the knowledge to be retained and performance to be managed to an acceptable level when all of your knowledge has gone and all of this knowledge was held is somehow vanished?
So we've spoken a lot about voice channels, and we have this constant debate about when should you use voice and when should you use digital. We know, you know, that when it gets emotional, when it gets difficult, when it gets complicated, human beings want to talk to another human being. That's the way it goes. But have you had any experience with the digital channels? Have they helped? Have they hindered? Have they what have they done to customer service perception and delivery?
Yeah, digital channels and CX. It's a niggle with me. This.
I can hear it in your voice.
When you start talking with people, they say, "Oh, but it's so much more cost effective to deal with a digital channel." Yes, it might be, but not everybody wants to engage with a digital channel. I remember being introduced to digital channels, let's say 2015, so it probably was about 10 years ago. And when I say digital channels, I mean not email, right? So web chat, asynchronous messaging, this, that, and the other. I think businesses don't necessarily know the difference between web chat and async. And I think customers that are still engaging with web chat now, they must have the patience of a saint, because from my own personal experience, web chat was probably dead before it even landed, because you're confined to this web page and you're terrified to move away from it or not look at it just in case you get hung up on by the operator on the other side, or if you disagree, or if you want to speak to somebody else. It's so difficult to achieve an acceptable resolution sometimes within digital channels.
Web chat's also the place where bots got a bad name, right? That's where everyone got their automated bot technology out, and some of them are absolutely shocking. Still today, they are just awful.
Yeah, 100%. Let's be honest here. I can be the worst customer in the world.
I'm not getting that. I'm not. You strike me as quite a tolerant individual.
Yeah, well, obviously I'm a very good actor, very tongue-in-cheek. Yeah, I can be an absolute nightmare. But the place where I become the worst nightmare is on web chat.
Right.
99 times out of 100, I will get so wound up by web chat experiences, because what frustrates me is this concurrency model. Businesses have been told, yeah, but you can deal with 16 chats at the same time. But if you're a frustrated customer like me, I'll type my message, and if I've not got a message back within a reasonable time, I start sending question marks through saying, what's going on? On my own personal experience, I've been on a chat dealing with a very simplistic matter for 40 minutes because of the length of time that it takes for people to respond. And let's be honest, I think a lot of businesses are misusing these digital mechanisms because I truly believe they don't understand how to manage them in the right way, especially when you ask customers to type in exactly what their problem is, and then they've got to repeat it the second an advisor comes available. And then you're like, have you not got access to this? Why am I saying it again?
Do you think that the senior leadership, C-suite exec, the owners of these businesses, whoever they may be, do you think they've got visibility of what's actually going on or not?
You're opening a massive can of worms with me now, Pete, because this comes into the whole data transparency piece. I think leaders get shown what they think they want to see. I would be very surprised if the exec teams get the warts and all view of reporting in relation to voice or digital, really.
Would they understand it if they saw it, do you think?
Well, I guess you never know until you really try. I've got experience whereby I've pulled data together for a report. The C-suite have looked at it, and the people that are in the room feel a little bit sheepish because of the data that they're now seeing does not line up with the version that they presented to the same C-suite members the week before. I think there is much more data manipulation that happens behind the scenes in those larger businesses because they just don't want the flag. And I think sometimes it's done to such an extent that businesses then think it's normal to exclude or manipulate data. And I've written an article on this around the whole data transparency piece. Data should not be a performance review. It should be, this is the current state of the business as we know it and as we see it. The reason I'm showing you this data in this way is because we need to pivot and do something differently to address the failings that this data is ultimately highlighting.
So Dan, given that context, which you've articulated really well, who do you go to in a business to go, we need to change something?
I tend to be quite respectful of hierarchy. The larger the organization, the politics increases. And the danger with being so open with data is you can be seen to be going over people's heads or contradicting other people in a more senior post than you.
So your stakeholder management and picking your stakeholders is quite careful.
Absolutely. It has to be once you get to a certain level. My own take on this is I would always communicate the warts and all message and scenario to my direct line manager.
Have you seen it done well? I mean, have you seen those walls broken down in a way that doesn't piss a load of people off or make them feel threatened or get embroiled in politics?
Ultimately, it comes down to whether or not somebody feels that there is a psychologically safe environment to be able to articulate their concerns to the right people. Yeah. And I think if I'm being completely transparent and honest, the more layers that there are within an organization, the harder it is to deliver proper, meaningful, credible data to the exec.
Too many filters.
Absolutely.
Right, too many filters. So there's internal data transparency. I think you've done a damn good job of painting a picture there. What about the external transparency? Should businesses be totally transparent about their data externally as well? If you go to a casino in Las Vegas and you look hard enough, there's a little bit of paper on the wall that tells you what their take is, right? What your chances are of winning anything in that building. Do you think our contact centres and our customer experience operations should be doing the same thing?
I've written an article on this as well about customer experience data transparency externally. People and consumers have a choice of who to buy products from. And ordinarily, people are making buying decisions on the basis of the marketing propaganda that has been presented to them as consumers, whether it's through a nice polished website, whether it's through sales professionals. Once you purchased your product, and as a consumer, it can be anything, you then enter into this after sales cycle. How you get dealt with in that after sales cycle might massively differ to the product that you have purchased, and the sales process might be very slick. Surely people should be able to see what level of service they're going to get when things don't necessarily go to plan.
Do you think Trustpilot and vehicles like that have a part to play? I've always had mixed feelings about that. I'm very cynical and I just assume all of them are made up. And does Trustpilot help with this problem?
You make a brilliant point on that, because for me, Trustpilot, you seldom get balanced views. You get very polarized views. You've either got a bunch of 5-star reviews or you get a bunch of 1-star reviews. I'm not really interested. As a customer, I either want it working for me, or I want to be able to say to a business, this did not work for me, so I'm going to give you this feedback in this way.
Yeah.
For me, I think when it comes to contact center provision of service, I've got a different point of view. I'm thinking, with all of the tech that's out there where people are promising wonderful customer experience, this, that, and the other, publish your contact center stats for the previous week or the previous month.
Or real
Stick
time.
it out there.
There's absolutely no reason why you couldn't show it in real time, because let's face it, most contact centres spend a fortune on seeing their stats in real time, and it's a mobile phone away, isn't it, for everybody?
The only thing that bears even the slightest resemblance to that I know is when you Google a business and it says what their busiest time may or may not be in terms of footfall. For me, give the power back to the consumer to make a choice around whether or not they want to engage with that centre at that time. And that, for me, it is very much an enabler for excellence in terms of service. It's like rush hour. Who in their right mind would choose to commute at rush hour? If you've got to go into a city centre, let's say, you're not going to say, oh, do you know what? I'm really going to pick my moment here and I'm going to go when everyone else is driving into work. You're not going to do it unless you're mental. The same goes when you call in a contact centre. Why on earth would you pick up the phone and deliberately call at their busiest time? The only instance where I know that this is the done thing is when doctor's surgery is open for appointments.
Yeah.
And then everyone descends on it because you've got no hope at all of securing an appointment unless you're there first.
Yeah.
And the other one goes for ticket sales, because once they're gone, they're gone.
You said something interesting, making your call centre stats, your customer experience stats visible to your customers or potential customers is an enabler of service excellence. So what's in it for the business? It's a risky thing to do, isn't it? What's in it for the business to be that transparent?
So you're right, it is a risk. Initially, I think that there will be absolutely mixed views. There will be people slating businesses for not having good enough service. But then on the other hand, you'll have other people that will say, well, this is the pinnacle of trust. Because if I knew the exact level of service that I was going to get from a provider when something goes wrong, and it was there to see, and it was acceptable to me in terms of wait times, then I would absolutely hand over my money. Look, if you could ever attend any of these contact center awards, right? There's lots of them. I think that over time, we might even end up with customer service transparency awards.
Yeah. So it all sounds like things aren't getting easier, they're getting more complicated. We spoke right at the beginning about the change in customer service delivery pre and post COVID and the whole thing around lots of skills exiting the business. Given that complexity, do you think leaders and managers are up to it? The people that are actually running our contact centres now, running our customer experience operations, do you think they've got the skills and the experience, the knowledge and the whatever else it takes to do a good job?
My honest opinion on this is I think everyone needs to almost stop what they're doing and perform a general assessment of everything that they do in terms of customer facing activities. And they also have to have a long, hard chat with themselves to say, are we enabling our people to deliver the service levels that we're expecting them to do by offering the right level of training? How are our recruitment and selection processes undertaken? Are we just picking people out of seats because they've been sat there the longest time? So now, of course, they're ready for the next level of promotion. Are we testing capability and competency as we're promoting these individuals, or are we just moving people because we don't have anybody else? I think until businesses undertake that totally fair, unbiased, independent assessment of their own internal capabilities, and we're never going to make sense of it. And I always use this Einstein quote. I think it was Einstein. Definition of insanity: doing the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result. But until that circuit break happens, they're just layering complexity over broken processes, broken systems, broken technology, and in some cases, broken people.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of people out there that are absolutely slogging their guts out, trying to do the best thing that they can for the businesses and the clients that they're serving, but they can't do it because they can't breathe, because they've got no capacity, and they're just running around with hair on fire, and they think that this existing in chaos is normal. It's not. With all of the experience that I've gained in contact centers, every single operation that I have ever walked onto has been almost in a state of chaos when I've walked onto it. But whenever I've left it, it's been stable. Right. And the only reason it's stable is because I've put thought, effort, and structure to the operation. And without that structure and without that careful consideration of where we are and just doing these continual assessments, no one's ever going to make progress. They're just going to add complexity.
So just picking up on what you've just said, you've walked into contact centers that are chaos.
Mm-hmm.
The one thing that's kind of popped up onto the radar in the last 24 months is the whole agent wellness thing. How important is that really? Because I've had very differing views ranging from, yes, it's the warm and fluffy, that's for bunny huggers and tree huggers down that side, all the way to, yes, I need to have a full team of psychologists on the floor with my agents. From your experience, where is it?
I absolutely think that there is a place, and businesses do need to do more for the employees that they have. I think it's a very different time now. We've got so many different generations now in the workforce. We're now on the cusp of introducing Generation Alpha into the workforce. And they are not the same as millennials. They're not the same as Gen X. And they're most definitely not the same as the baby boomers. They expect a certain amount of respect and tolerance within the workforce. I think that businesses do need to do a lot more with their wellness and well-being programs than what they are. I think certain businesses will say, oh, here is an employee assistance card, an EAP process. Here you go. If you're feeling stressed, give this number a call. That is not a wellness program. That is not a welfare check. That is doing the absolute bloody bare minimum in order to try and stop these people from leaving. But there are fundamental gaps in how these businesses are run If businesses put this task and responsibility solely on HR teams, it will always fail. Employee wellness, mental health, all of that sort of stuff is every single person's problem. It's not HR's problem. And it all comes down to management and leadership training. Are we training the right behaviors to enable really supportive and inclusive cultures within the workforce? Because if we all were doing that, you wouldn't need these EAP cards that are just handed out for the sake of handing them out. The community that has been built and the leadership will all be following the exact same values-driven approach to be respectful to these workforces. And at the end of the day, the younger generations haven't got the same level of experiences that the rest of us have. And if I'm being completely honest, a lot of the longer standing leaders have made little to no effort to actually understand how these generations work and understand what are the true root causes for dissatisfaction in the workplace.
Yeah.
He doesn't want to say exactly what he's thinking, but he's saying that the older, more experienced crew have not changed one iota.
Exactly. This is a massive subject. We're not going to be able to do it justice. But do you know what? Maybe we'll ask you back and we'll have another go on this particular hobby horse. But we've reached that point in the show, Dan. You'll be glad to hear, where we grant you these three things that you can bring to the party, whether they're pearls of wisdom or bits of advice or wishes, if you will, for yourself, for your colleagues, for the industry. What have you got?
So for me, employee experience drives customer experience. Behavior drives performance. Metrics do not drive performance, is the first thing. People need to know how to deliver. They don't need to know what to strive to in order to be successful. They just need to know how to do it, and performance will follow. For me, quality over quantity. I think if you put the right level of effort in, and that is systemic across your culture, where everybody gives 100% or as close to 100% as they can every single day, and they do it in the right way by following a proper structure, that's always going to pay dividends in operations for me. And also transform through technology as it evolves, absolutely, but lead with humanity and take time to actually understand what the pain points of the workforce are, and whether it's a process problem before you start layering technology on top. Because there's a lot of promises out there in the CX world to say, buy this system, it's going to create a miracle. All of your customers will be instantly happy overnight. They won't if the process is broken and the workforce is not involved in the process.
I hope you're listening to that, CX sellers out there. Anyway, Dan, it has been a pleasure. It's been very interesting. It's been very thought-provoking. You've done a great job of not naming and shaming all those organisations that you were undoubtedly thinking about as we went through this. Thank you for that. So it's a big cheers from Pete.
Yeah, and definitely thank you from me. You've given me lots of things to think about, and probably you've given us at least 10 episodes of stuff to talk about. And I think we might definitely call on your expertise and get you back sometime.
Thank you. And thank you for taking my podcast virginity.
CX Insider, your inside track.
Wow, Angus, that was really interesting, wasn't it? A real inside track from someone who obviously knows their shit and certainly knows how to run a contact centre operation. What did you think?
I thought, listening to those real insights from the coalface was certainly some things that I'd never heard. So that was new to me as well.
It's a different angle. It's good to hear it from the other side of our fence. We spent way too much time in vendor and seller world. It's good to get those angles from the other side. And Dan's obviously, he's an experienced guy. Did you know he's just struck out on his own and he's started his own CX consultancy business? So he's focused on helping exec teams navigate this complex world of ours and helping them to get the best out of their business, the best out of themselves for their customers and their employees. And a lot of that came through in what we've just heard. His company's called Setek Solutions, SETEKH Solutions. So we'll put some links in the show notes to help you to find out more about his business. But also he mentioned some articles that he's written, and there'll be links in there for that as well. They've been an interesting read.
I think the thing to mention is he did not ask us to do this.
No, he didn't. Listening to him and have met him, if I had a contact center and I was in trouble, I'd want someone like him advising me, asking all the difficult questions, and not only borrowing your watch and telling you the time, actually having the experience of doing this stuff at the coalface. You might want to think about Dan when you're thinking about your contact center problems. So what were the highlights for you, Angus? Let's summarize it for our listeners.
I'll tell you, the first thing that jumped out is the COVID pandemic changed customer service, but it also changed expectations. It made customers less demanding. Many businesses are still hiding behind that customer service fog of the pandemic, which is an interesting viewpoint because you don't hear that a lot.
It hasn't improved customer service. It's really justified a slide in standards. And when we were talking about the whole data transparency thing, the internal data transparency thing, you can see why. Businesses can't see the wood for the trees now. So that whole thing around internal data transparency, I found very interesting.
I think the other one was agent wellness.
Yeah.
Now, his take on agent wellness and really what it should mean in an organization was interesting, because I think if you listen to a lot of the tech vendors in this space, they think about just one piece of the puzzle. Talking about process was something that a lot of people don't talk about. They talk about those features. So going a bit deeper. If you're a seller, go deeper on this one, because I think it's an important topic.
And I like the phrase that performance isn't driven by data; it's driven by behaviour. That's a really good soundbite. We're so obsessed with numbers and data and digits and KPIs in contact center. Behaviour is the thing, right? Human to human behaviour fundamentally is what it's all about, and that all feeds into the wellness of the people and the motivation of the people and the quality of the people. And I like that. I like that so much. I'm going to say it again. Performance isn't driven by data, Angus. It is driven by behaviour.
The one that I loved was that technology should enhance human interaction, but not replace it. I think it's really true. It's there to help, not to replace. I think that's a big topic that's top of mind for a lot of people with AI coming along. And I think, that leads into kind of leadership have got to be involved in building that supportive work environment. It's fundamental. You can't just leave these into different silos in the business either.
Yeah, and that last one, that bottom line, before you think about adding technology to the mix, make sure you've got an optimal environment. If you've got a broken business with broken processes and broken people, all technology is going to do is make the mess bigger and more expensive.
It's a more efficient cock-up.
Yeah, exactly. A more efficient, better documented, more effectively reported on cock-up. Anyway, I think we're done, which means we're going to be back next time with episode 20, Angus, 20. We're in our second decade. Or is it the third decade? Is it the third decade or the second one?
After 20, we're in our second. Most people said we wouldn't get past 3.
They did, and you know who you are. Anyway, we'll be back next time with episode 20.
In the meantime, follow the Angus and Pete Show on LinkedIn for news and notifications, and message us directly to tell us what you wanted us to talk about, how we're doing, and please keep that post bag bulging.
The show's available on all your favourite podcast platforms, so please listen and like and subscribe and share and repost and help us to spread the word.
Pete.
Yes, Angus.
Before we go, we've got to have that joke of the week.
Okay. This time it's short and sweet. So, a new contact centre director is employed to drive improvement in customer satisfaction and sentiment. And he has a first meeting with his new CEO, and he shows him some stats and some data. And the CEO says, hang on a minute. Why are our hold times so long? And the new contact center director said, well, it's all part of our customer engagement strategy. And the CEO says, how is putting people on hold for 30 minutes engaging? And the new guy says, well, when they finally get to talk to an agent, they really appreciate it. Which I think is actually HMRC strategy, isn't it? Or
it could be.
Yes. Anyway, cheers, Angus.
Cheers, Pete.
Thanks for tuning in to the Angus and Pete Show. Remember, it's based on the personal views and opinions of the hosts and their guests. If you're feeling aggrieved or litigious, take a chill pill. There's already enough stress in the world. Don't forget to follow our page on LinkedIn and subscribe on your favourite podcast platform for more episodes. We'll see you next time. Oh, and tell your friends.